And let's bring in privacy legal expert Elizabeth Laird for more on the potential impacts of DOGE trying to access this database. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on. From what you understand so far, what information would they have access to if this request by DOGE is approved?
Yeah. So the first thing I would start is by saying that they already have access to really sensitive information. So this is another agency that has now been implicated, but there already have been lawsuits that have been filed over the last week and a half that also include tax records. So I think it's important to recognize that this is just another in a series of attempts of DOGE to access really sensitive information about people. And I think something that not everyone realizes, if you're thinking, well, aren't there protections against the federal government collecting and using information without my permission? The answer is yes. And not only are there protections, but they date back to the Watergate scandal, recognizing that the federal government needs sensitive information about people, and there need to be limitations placed upon how they can use it and who should have access to it. So in the case of tax records, some of the sensitive information that people think about are your income and your social security number. But if you think about what your tax records show, they show the course of your life and your year. They talk about whether you were married or whether you had a child. Like, this is the most sensitive information that people have about themselves, and expect that at a minimum, the federal government will use it in ways that are consistent with existing laws. And beyond that, I think most reasonable people expect that you will treat it securely, given how sensitive it is and the consequences if it falls into the wrong hands.
Now, a district judge has temporarily blocked DOGE's access to the Treasury Department system, but DOGE, and you alluded to this a little bit, has successfully gotten access to data at the Departments of Labor and Health and Human Services. So how is this access that they already have different to what they're asking for from the IRS now?
Yeah. Well, one difference is that no one has filed a lawsuit yet. Generally, the lawsuits that we're seeing filed, I would add the Department of Education to that list too. Judges are granting these temporary restraining orders because the lawyers that are representing the agencies that are sharing information on are unable to answer very basic questions that most people would expect someone to know, like, who has access to my information? In what capacity are they operating? How are they taking steps to keep it safe and secure? So one thing that I would point out is that there has not been a lawsuit filed yet specific to the IRS, but in some of the other lawsuits, like the Treasury you mentioned, like the Department of Education, one of the grounds for which these lawsuits have been filed is that they not only violate the longstanding privacy protections that have existed since the 70s, but there are also additional protections that are specifically applicable to tax records, because there has been longstanding acknowledgement that this is very sensitive information.
And it's tax season now, right? Millions of Americans, we're all getting ready to file our taxes if we haven't already. Should we be worried about the info included in those returns?
I think we should all be asking questions of not just Congress, but as people whose data has been submitted to the IRS under the assumption and commitment that it would be used in ways that are legal, and that the federal government will take steps to keep it safe. And I would add, in addition to the privacy and security questions that we've talked about, as the last person mentioned, I think there's another question which we haven't discussed as much, which is, how is this information actually going to lead to the identification and remediation and prevention of fraud, waste, and abuse? There's been reporting that, at least for the Department of Education access, that this is fed into an AI system. And so all of the questions that we're wrestling with as a country in terms of, can AI do what it's supposed to do? Can that information be kept secure, are all at play here, only it's with the most sensitive information that we have, and for tens of millions of people.
Now, White House spokesperson Harrison Field says waste, fraud, and abuse have been deeply entrenched in our broken system for far too long. It takes direct access to that system to identify and fix it. What's your response to that? Could this help clean up or streamline our tax system?
Well, I would say, before I was in this role, I worked in government. So I was on the other side of this debate and actively involved in identifying and addressing fraud, waste, and abuse. And I think there's a lot more that we need to know about what does fraud, waste, and abuse mean to them. I think some of the reports around what they would constitute to fit into that category is also just things that they don't like. which you don't necessarily need that level of information in order to accomplish.
All right, privacy legal expert Elizabeth Laird, thank you.